At my daughter's engagement dinner, 70 guests were raising their glasses while her fiancé smiled beside her like the answer to every prayer a father ever spoke. The restaurant was full of candlelight and laughter, and the particular warmth of a room where everyone has decided the evening is going to be perfect. Then Clara leaned across the table, her hand closing over mine the way it hadn't since she was small, and she pressed her phone flat against my palm and said, without moving her lips, "Don't react, Dad. Just read it." 5 words and a phone screen. No explanation. My chest tightened the way it used to tighten in federal courtrooms when the evidence said one thing and the defendant's face said another. I kept smiling for the table. I kept my eyes soft and warm and completely, deliberately still. 28 years as a forensic accountant for the Department of Justice had given me exactly one skill above all others, and I used every bit of it now. I looked down at the phone in my lap. The text was from a contact saved as RV. The message read, "Transfer confirmed. Phase 2 starts after the ceremony. Keep him settled." I set the phone on my knee and breathed exactly the way I used to breathe before I walked into a deposition I wasn't sure I was going to survive. Before we go any further, friends, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Your city, your state, wherever you are. I love knowing who's in this with me. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Some details in this story have been shaped for reflection and for telling, but everything it teaches you is worth holding on to. The November light in Charleston is different from anywhere else I've ever lived. It comes in low and golden through the Spanish moss, and it makes everything look like a memory, even while it's still happening. The restaurant Clara had chosen sat on East Bay Street, the kind of place with white tablecloths and candles in hurricane glasses, and a sommelier who knew the difference between helping and hovering. She had reserved the private dining room in the back, and when I walked in that evening in the suit June had picked out for me the Christmas before she got sick, I thought she would have loved this. She would have cried at least twice before the appetizers arrived and then laughed at herself for crying, and Clara would have handed her a napkin and pretended not to notice. But June was gone 3 years now, and I was the only alderman at the corner seat, watching my daughter get engaged. Clara looked like her mother. Not in the surface way people say that to be kind, but in the actual structural way, the set of the jaw, the way her hands moved when she talked, the specific quality of her attention when she thought something mattered. She was 32 years old, and she had her mother's gray eyes and her mother's habit of seeing things before she said them, which was why, when she pressed that phone into my palm, I understood that she had been sitting on this for longer than one evening. Marcus Hale sat beside her. He was 36, broad-shouldered, dark hair worn slightly long, the kind of handsome that made people in a room orient toward him without quite knowing why. He worked in real estate development, he had told me the first time we met. 11 months ago, at a Sunday brunch Clara had arranged with the care of someone diffusing a device. He'd shaken my hand with the practiced confidence of a man who shook important hands for a living and said, "Mr. Alderman, Clara has told me so much about you. The work you did at Justice, the cases, all of it. I have so much respect for that career." I had smiled and said thank you, and something moved in the back of my mind like a door I hadn't decided whether to open. 70 guests filled the private room and the main dining area beyond it. Family, colleagues, friends of Clara's from her hospital administration job, people I recognized and people I had never seen before. Friends of Marcus's, Clara had told me. Developers, investors, associates from Atlanta and Charlotte, and somewhere in Virginia. They looked polished in the way people look. Polished when being polished is part of the work. Clara's best friend Diane gave a toast that made the room laugh, and then go quiet and then laugh again. And then Marcus raised his glass and said something about Clara being the first person who ever made him want to stop moving and stay somewhere. And I watched my daughter's face do the thing it does when something reaches the place she doesn't usually let things reach. That particular softness behind the eyes that June used to call her tell. And then she leaned across the table and pressed her phone into my palm. Transfer confirmed. Phase 2 starts after the ceremony. Keep him settled. I set the phone down and looked at Marcus across the table, and he was laughing at something the man beside him had said, his head thrown back, completely at ease. And I thought, you have no idea she saw that. I excused myself to get some air. Nobody questioned it. Fathers of engaged daughters were allowed small disappearances. The East Bay sidewalk was cold enough to see my breath. I walked to the corner and stood with my hands in my jacket pockets and looked out at the harbor and let the December wind off the water pull at my collar while I organized what was happening inside my chest into something that resembled clarity. My phone was already in my hand. I pulled up Frank Okafor in my contacts. 30 years. The man who had been my closest colleague at Justice before I retired, who now ran a private financial investigation firm out of Columbia. Frank answered on the second ring the way he always answered, regardless of the hour, regardless of what he was doing. Richard. His voice was careful. He had learned to read my calls the same way I had learned to read ledgers. I need you to run a name, I said. Marcus Hale, real estate developer, works out of Charleston. Cross-reference a contact initial R, V, and any LLC structure attached to either name. And Frank, I need this tonight. A pause, not long. Frank didn't waste time on long pauses. This about Clara? Yes. How bad? I looked at the harbor, the lights from the far shore making broken lines across the black water. I don't know yet. That's why I'm calling. I'll call you by morning, he said, and he was gone. I stood there one more minute. 3 years since June. 2 of those years I had spent learning how to inhabit a house that was too quiet. The 3rd year I had spent trying to do better at being present for Clara in the way I had never quite managed when work consumed every available hour. She had spent her whole childhood understanding that her father loved her and was also always somewhere else. I had promised myself, standing at June's grave on a Tuesday in October, that I was going to do better, that the next time my daughter needed me, I was going to be there before she had to ask. She had not asked. She had just pressed a phone into my palm and trusted me to know what to do. I went back inside. Marcus was near the bar talking with 2 men I didn't recognize, his hand resting on one man's shoulder, his voice low and easy. He had a quality I had seen before in long careers of watching people who were very good at being in rooms. Not charm exactly. Something more deliberate. The sense that wherever he was standing was exactly where he had planned to stand. He looked up and found me across the room and smiled. The warm, genuine smile of a man with nothing to hide. I smiled back. I picked up a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and raised it slightly in his direction. Neither of us looked away first. I found Clara near the windows 20 minutes later. She was talking with Diane, but her eyes came to me the moment I entered the edge of her vision, and she excused herself with the practiced ease of someone who had been waiting. We stepped into the corridor near the coat check. The noise of the room muffled behind the closed door. How long? I said. 10 days, she said. Her voice was steady. Clara had always been steady in the way people are steady when they have been holding something very heavy for long enough that the weight becomes familiar. I found it by accident. I was using his laptop because mine was charging. A browser window was open. There was a spreadsheet, Dad. I kept my face exactly where it was. What was in it? She told me. Asset column by column. June's estate, which had transferred to Clara on her 30th birthday per the terms June had specified in her will. The Charleston row house, which Clara owned outright. A joint investment account she and Marcus had opened 6 weeks after the engagement, where $140,000 of her savings was currently sitting. Every number accurate. Every value current. At the top of the spreadsheet, a tab labeled Timeline. Beneath it, one line. 90 days post-ceremony. Before legal intervention window. The corridor was very quiet around us. Somewhere behind the door, a burst of laughter rose and fell. You've been carrying this for 10 days, I said. I didn't know how to tell you. Her voice dropped at the edges just slightly. You would have wanted to fix it immediately, and I needed to think. I looked at my daughter, 32 years old, her mother's eyes, her mother's stubborn, precise intelligence, and 10 days of sitting at dinner tables and laughing at the right moments, and going to bed beside a man whose laptop contained a spreadsheet with her life on it. You should have called me, I said. I know. A pause. I'm calling you now. I put my hand on her shoulder and held it there. Listen to me. You go back in there. You finish the evening. You act like nothing has changed. Can you do that? She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face since the morning after June died, when she had walked into the hospital room and found me already there, and realized she was going to have to be strong for both of us. I've been doing it for 10 days, Dad. I know, I said. I know you have. We went back in separately. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the desk in the study of my house on Rutledge Avenue, the room that had been June's reading room when she was alive, crowded with her books and her yellow legal pads, and the particular organized disorder of a woman who had 17 projects running simultaneously. It was neater now. The books were still there, but the yellow pads were gone, and the room felt the way rooms feel when only one person uses them. On the corner of the desk sat a framed photograph, June, in the garden, spring, her hair loose, laughing at something I had said from behind the camera. She looked like a woman who had just decided everything was going to be fine. I opened the bottom drawer. June's journal from her last year. I had put it there 6 months after she died when I could finally bear to hold it without needing to put it back down immediately. I had opened it exactly twice since then. I opened it now. Most of it I had read before. Her voice in the cramped, deliberate handwriting she used when she was working something through. Her thoughts about the diagnosis. About Clara. About me. And then, near the back, an entry dated 14 months ago, 3 months before she died, 4 months before Clara met Marcus. Clara needs someone who will choose her every single day without being asked. Not someone who makes her feel lucky. Someone who makes her feel safe. My hand tightened on the cover. She had written it without knowing, without any context. Just a mother recording what she knew about her daughter, the way mothers accumulate truths about their children without always having somewhere to put them. Frank Okafor called at 6:47 in the morning. "Talk to me," I said. "Marcus Ellison Hale," Frank said, and I heard him sitting up at his desk, papers moving. 36, real estate developer, licensed in South Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia. Legitimate surface operation. 2 commercial projects currently in development in the greater Charleston area. Clean credit, clean record. He paused. Below the surface, different story. I picked up my pen. He's a named partner in a Delaware LLC called Meridian Horizon Group, registered 18 months ago. No website, no listed clients. The registered agent address is a mail facility in Wilmington. The LLC has received 3 wire transfers in the past 14 months from a Nevada holding company. Another pause. The Nevada company traces back 2 layers to a man named Roland Veitch. The name landed in my chest like a stone. "Richard?" Frank's voice came through the phone carefully. "You know that name. I prosecuted Roland Veitch 12 years ago," I said. "Wire fraud. Money laundering through a commercial real estate structure in Atlanta. He served 6 of 11 years. I testified at his sentencing. A silence on Frank's end that meant he was processing something he had been about to tell me, and now understood it differently. "He was released 14 months ago," Frank said. 14 months ago is when the first payment went from his Nevada company to Hale's LLC. I set the pen down. Outside, the Rutledge Avenue morning was coming gray through the live oaks, the Spanish moss hanging still in the cold air. "He funded it," I said. "Every dollar of the operational structure appears to trace back to Veitch," Frank confirmed. "There's one more thing. The contact in Clara's phone, RV. I pulled call records from Hale's business line. He and a number registered to a prepaid carrier in Richmond have been in contact 11 times in the past 60 days. Veitch is managing it personally," I said. "That's how it reads." I looked at June's photograph. I had put Roland Veitch in a federal courtroom 12 years ago and done the right thing by every standard I had ever held myself to. And he had spent 6 years in a minimum security facility in Georgia, planning exactly how to reach through time and take something from me that I could not get back. "Frank," I said, "I need everything. Every transfer, every registration, every layer of the structure. I need it documented and clean. How long do I have?" I thought about the spreadsheet. 90 days post-ceremony. The engagement dinner had been last night. The wedding was scheduled for February. "More time than I thought," I said, "but I don't want to use all of it." I called Clara at 8. She answered immediately. Her voice had the particular flatness of someone who had not slept either, and was not pretending otherwise. "He asked me this morning about the investment account," she said quietly. "Said he'd been thinking we should move some funds into one of his development projects before the wedding. Presented it as a gift to ourselves. A stake in our future." Her breath came through the phone, controlled and even. I told him I'd think about it. He smiled and made coffee. Don't touch the account, I said. Tell your bank this morning to flag any transfer request for review. Tell them it's a personal security precaution. Don't mention Marcus by name. Already done, she said. I called them at 7. Something moved through me that was equal parts grief and pride. She had been doing this alone for 10 days. She had thought through the steps without being asked. June had raised a daughter who knew how to be steady when steadiness was the only option. Clara. My voice came out lower than I intended. I need to say something. Dad, I wasn't there enough when you were growing up. I know that. You knew it, and you never said it, and that was generous of you, and it was also something I should have fixed a long time ago. I stopped. Started again. I'm here now, whatever this takes. The line was quiet for a moment. Then, very carefully, she said, I know, Dad. I know you are. My colleague at Justice, a woman named Patricia Greer, who now ran the Fraud Division's Southeast Regional Office, called me back within 2 hours of my message. She had known me for 25 years. She heard the shape of what I was describing without needing every detail. If you can give me a documented payment chain from a Nevada entity to a Delaware LLC to a named individual currently engaged to a federal employee's family member, Patricia said carefully, and connect that chain to a man with a prior federal conviction for wire fraud, I can have someone interested in this by end of week. I'll have it to you by Thursday, I said. Richard. Her voice dropped. Be careful how you move. If Veitch is managing this personally and he learns you're aware, the timeline accelerates. I know how this works, I said. I know you do. I'm saying it anyway. Frank arrived at my door Wednesday morning in the same battered Volvo he had driven since his daughter was in middle school. He came in through the back without knocking, poured himself coffee from the pot I had made at 5, and spread 3 folders across the kitchen table with the efficiency of a man who had spent the night organizing information for maximum impact. Veitch's structure, he said, pulling a printed page from the first folder. Delaware LLC seeded 14 months ago. First transfer $35,000 to Meridian Horizon. Second transfer $20,000 4 months later. Third transfer $40,000 2 weeks ago. He tapped the page. $115,000. Enough to cover the operational costs of establishing Hale's credibility in Charleston. The apartment, the projects that look real, the professional references. The projects are real? I said. 2 of them are real, Frank said. Small enough to be functional cover, large enough to show up in property records. He's not stupid, Richard. He built something that looks completely legitimate from the outside. He moved to the second folder. Hale's background, South Carolina native, real family, real career for the first 8 years. First contact with Veitch, best I can trace it, about 2 years ago. Veitch found him through a mutual contact in the commercial real estate circuit. He paused. Hale had a significant debt problem. 2 failed development projects in 2022. He was looking for a backer. I thought about the first time Marcus Hale had shaken my hand and told me he respected my career. I thought about the way he had said it, the particular precision of someone who had done research. He needed access, I said. Veitch gave him the money and the target. Frank nodded. Clara was selected because of her asset profile and her connection to you. Veitch didn't pick a random target. He met my eyes across the kitchen table. He picked yours specifically. The kitchen was quiet around us. The December light came flat and gray through the window over the sink. June had stood at that window every morning of our life in this house, coffee mug in both hands, looking out at the garden like she was checking on something that mattered. I pressed my hands flat on the table. The hands of a man who had spent 28 years following money through shell companies and falsified documents and offshore accounts. The hands that had helped put Roland Veitch in a federal courtroom 12 years ago. We freeze the account, I said. Clara's investment account. Patricia can coordinate with her bank contacts to put a formal hold in place by Friday morning. The moment Hale tries to initiate any transfer, it's flagged, it's held, and we have documentation of the attempt. Frank picked up his coffee, and when the transfer fails, he calls Veitch. And that call, I said, is what Patricia needs. I met Clara for lunch on Thursday, a small Vietnamese place on King Street that she had loved since college. and that we had eaten at together without Marcus 11 times in the past year, which I now understood was her way of keeping a place in her life that was entirely her own. She was already at the corner table when I arrived. She had ordered tea for both of us. Her hands were wrapped around the mug, and her expression was the careful, composed expression of a woman who had decided to hold herself together for one more day. I told her everything. Frank's findings, Vaitch's history, the payment chain, the Friday plan. I laid it out in order, the way I used to brief a grand jury. Every piece in its place, nothing left dangling. She listened without interrupting. Her hands stayed wrapped around the mug. The only sign of what she was feeling was a periodic tightening around her jaw. Small and controlled, the movement of someone managing the distance between what they're hearing and what they're allowing themselves to feel. When I got to Vaitch, something shifted in her face. "He chose Marcus because of you," she said. Not a question. "Yes." She looked at the table for a moment. Her jaw worked. Then she looked up. "And Marcus chose me because I was the easiest path to the assets." "That's what the evidence indicates," I said carefully. "How much of it was real?" she said. Her voice was barely above conversation level, and it was the steadiest thing in the room. "I keep asking myself that. When he was actually funny, when he said something that surprised me, when he talked about wanting to stay in one place." She stopped. "How much of it was real and how much of it was research?" I looked at my daughter. I did not have a clean answer. I had spent 28 years in a profession where the line between performance and truth blurred in ways that kept you awake. What I knew was that Marcus Hale had identified Clara Alderman through a spreadsheet and positioned himself in her life through a coordinated introduction, and that none of the warmth he had shown her erased the existence of that spreadsheet. What I also knew was that she was going to have to live with the ambiguity of not knowing for certain, and that I could not resolve that for her, no matter how much I wanted to. "Clara," I said, "whatever was real and whatever wasn't, you saw it. You trusted yourself, and you didn't say nothing." I held her eyes. "That was your mother in you." Something cracked in her face, fast and involuntary, around the eyes. She pressed her lips together and looked at the window and blinked twice and then came back. "What do you need me to do?" she said. "2 more days," I said. "Act like nothing has changed. Friday morning, the hold goes into place. When his transfer fails, he'll contact Vaitch. That contact is what Patricia needs." She nodded. Her jaw was set. The expression I was looking at was not the expression of a woman who had been broken by what she'd found on that laptop. It was the expression of a woman who had decided. "I can do 2 more days," she said. "I know you can," I said. I drove home from King Street through the Friday morning fog. By the time I turned onto Rutledge Avenue, Frank's text was already on my screen. Patricia's hold went through at 9:03. Transfer attempt flagged at 9:17. $140,000 held pending review. $140,000. Everything Clara had put into that account. He had not waited for the wedding. He had moved the moment the joint account gave him access, exactly the way a man moves when he believes no one is watching. My phone rang. Frank again. "Hale's cell made a call at 9:22, Frank said. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Receiving number is a Richmond area code registered to a prepaid carrier." He paused. "Patricia's contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is already moving. They've been watching the Vaitch structure independently for 7 months. Your documentation was the piece they needed to connect it to an active scheme." I pulled into my driveway and sat with the engine off. The live oaks in front of the house stood perfectly still in the morning cold. The Spanish moss hanging gray and heavy, everything quiet the way Charleston goes quiet in December, when the tourists have gone and the city settles back into itself. Clara called at 9:51. Her voice was controlled in the way voices are controlled when something enormous has just shifted. "He just left," she said. "He said he had a site meeting in North Charleston. He took the overnight bag he keeps in the closet." A breath. The one he said he kept packed for emergency work trips. "Where are you?" I said. "Still in the apartment." Her voice dropped, just at the edges. "Dad." He kissed me goodbye. He stood in the doorway and smiled and told me he'd see me for dinner. Another breath. And then he left. "Clara." My voice came out steady. "Lock the door. I'm 20 minutes away." Patricia Greer called at 10:34 while I was on the Crosstown Connector. Marcus Hale was detained at the Charleston Executive Airport at 10:18, she said without preamble, in the clipped cadence of someone relaying facts that needed no dressing. He had a boarding pass for a flight to Richmond. Roland Veitch was taken into custody at his home in Richmond at 10:09 Eastern. Federal warrant. She paused. One beat. Richard, the Veitch network has active operations in 3 other states. Your documentation collapsed the whole structure, not just the Charleston case. I looked at the highway ahead of me. December light on the Cooper River Bridge, the cables silver against the gray sky, the water far below moving dark and steady. Is Clara protected? I said. Her assets are fully secured, Patricia said. The flagged transfer was reversed. The investment account is back in her name alone. No shared access. We'll need her for a statement, but she's not a subject of any investigation. She's a victim who reported. Another pause, softer. She did everything right, Richard. Yes, I said. She did. I found Clara sitting at the kitchen table in her apartment with both hands around a coffee mug she hadn't drunk from. She looked up when I came in through the unlocked door she'd left open for me, and for a moment she just looked at me, and I could see the 3 weeks of performance and steadiness and control cracking down the middle the way things crack when they no longer need to hold. I crossed the kitchen and sat down across from her, and she pressed her hands over her mouth, and her shoulders shook twice, hard. And then she pulled in a long breath and straightened. Her eyes were wet, and her jaw was set, and she looked exactly like her mother. It's done, I said. She nodded, once, using the motion to push something back down. Patricia says you did everything right, I said. Clara looked at her coffee mug. I found the spreadsheet, and I sat on it for 10 days before I called you, she said. I'm not sure that's everything right. You called me, I said. That's what matters. She looked up. Her eyes were still bright at the edges, but her expression had settled into something I recognized. The specific quality of a person who has been through something and discovered they are still intact on the other side. I almost didn't, she said. I thought you'd want to take it over, turn it into a case. I held her gaze and felt the full weight of what she had just said, the weight of all the years that had made that a reasonable thing to think. Did I said. She almost smiled, not all the way, but something close. No, she said. You let me tell you first. We sat in that kitchen through the rest of the morning. I did not tell her what to feel. I did not outline the next steps in any operational order. I made more coffee, and I sat across from my daughter, and I let the morning be what it was. A December Friday in Charleston, cold and gray and very quiet. Around noon, she said, Mom would have known from the beginning, wouldn't she? Probably, I said. Clara turned her coffee mug in a slow circle. She left me something, she said, in the envelope with the will. Her lawyer gave it to me on my 30th birthday the way she specified. She stopped. I've been thinking about it all week. What did she say? I asked. Clara looked up, her gray eyes, June's eyes, very steady. She said, Clara, baby, your father is the best man I have ever known. He is also the most absent person I have ever loved. The older I get, the more I understand those things are not opposites. Let him in when you need him. He will show up. He just sometimes needs to be called. My throat closed completely. I looked at my daughter across the kitchen table and felt something that had been knotted in my chest for 3 years release in one long, quiet breath. She knew you'd wait for me to ask, Clara said. Yes, I said, she knew me. Clara nodded. She looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked back up. Thank you for answering, she said, for not waiting for more information before you picked up the phone, for not needing it all to make sense before you got in the car. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. Your mother told me, I said, that the most important thing a person can do is be reachable. Not smart, not prepared. Reachable. Clara turned her hand under mine and held on. We stayed like that for a while. The December quiet of Charleston around us, a city settling into its cold season. The harbor gray, the mossy oaks still, the old streets doing what old streets do, holding everything that had happened in them, without giving any of it away. There is a bench in White Point Garden, at the tip of the Battery, where June and I used to sit on Sunday evenings and watch the water go from gold to dark, while Clara was growing up, and the world was full and fast, and I was always half somewhere else. We went back once after she died, and I sat there alone and understood for the first time what I had been doing on all those Sunday evenings, when I had been physically present and mentally already at the next case, the next deposition, the next thread that needed pulling. I went back there the Sunday after Marcus Hale was detained, alone, in the early morning before the tourists arrived. The harbor was iron gray and absolutely still. The old cannons along the seawall sat cold and quiet in the December air. I sat on the bench and put my hands on my knees and looked at the water for a long time. I thought about Roland Veitch sitting in a federal holding facility in Richmond, 12 years older. The scheme he had spent 14 months building collapsed in a single Friday morning. I thought about what it cost a man to spend 6 years in a cell nursing a grudge instead of letting it go. I thought about what it costs anyone to hold on to something that heavy for that long. I thought about Clara at her kitchen table with both hands around a cold coffee mug. I thought about June on the bench beside me on all those Sunday evenings, watching the water turn dark, saying nothing, because she had learned that silence beside me was more useful than competition with wherever my mind was. I pulled out my phone and opened the photograph I had taken of the journal entry, June's handwriting. Clara needs someone who will choose her every single day without being asked. I read it once. Then I closed it and put the phone back in my pocket. Friends, if this story reached something in you tonight, I want you to hear what I learned at the cost of more years than I want to count. The people who love us are always watching. They are patient in ways we do not deserve, and generous in ways we forget to notice. And they are recording things in journals we will not find until we finally need to read them. Do not wait for a crisis to show up for the people who have been showing up for you. Do not wait for your daughter to press a phone into your palm at an engagement dinner to understand that she needed you long before that moment and was too careful of your limits to say so. God gave us each other, and He gave us the sense to know when something is wrong. Trust both while you still have time. The account can be replaced. The missed years cannot. Leave me a comment, friends. Tell me where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And subscribe so you never miss another story that matters.